Hey everybody, what's going on? Poppin' Fresh here with Season 13 of VBLS. And the theme of this season is change. So Draft League has gotten totally out of hand. Look at how powerful the draft board from last season was. Like, look at the monsters on this board. The power level of this board was so crazy, we had to stretch it from like the regular 20 points to 1 point, all the way up to 29, where it was literally just Qian Pao at 29 points. Playing against mons like this is so overwhelming. If you make one mistake or like make one bad call in prep, the match is over before it even starts. I don't think I'm alone in saying that something needed to change. Playing season after season against the Ruin mons, the Paradox mons, a million prankster users, and something stupid that each team has every week, it gets a little stale, right? Not to mention all the stuff you have to consider when you're drafting your team. It hurts your brain. You can end up in the ICU from doing that kind of thinking. So what's the solution? What do? We tried a couple different point structures over the couple of years to try to limit the impact of these super overpowered mons in this giant draft pool. But ultimately, Scarlet and Violet, they're just the most power crept games of all time. That's how they are. That's how they're always going to be remembered. Well, theoretically, the next game could be even more power crept, but let's cross our fingers on that. So when you have all these different factors going on, there's only one thing to do. You got to swing the banhammer, baby. So Season 13 of the VBL is our first ever low tier format. We totally just chopped off the top half of the last season's board, made some judgment calls on things that were like a little too OP if they were left behind. So that was mainly Regigigas and Slacking. Sorry, maybe next season, guys. And then we stretched everything that was left back into the 20 through 1 board. So the difference in power between this format and last is just crazy. Our resident legendary ice type top tier is not Qian Pao anymore, now it's Articuno. So which of those two would you rather misplay in front of? I think the choice is pretty clear. But even considering that, the power on this board is still pretty high. Like there's good mons left, and I think they can put in a lot of work this season. But the key difference here is just how much smoother the power curve is. Like, Articuno isn't that much better than the stuff in 19. The stuff in 19 is not that much better than 18, and so on and so forth. So it's just going to be a lot more of a level playing field, I think, going into the season. So let's take a look at this new format and see what we've got to work with this time. The biggest thing to note about this new season is the type composition of the low tier format. So we've got 3 scary charts here, but don't worry, we're going to break them down. First, we're going to look at the type Pareto. And what this is a representation of the frequency of the types present in the format. So you can see up at the top, we have grass and water being the 2 most common. Then there's a 3-way tie for third between flying, normal, and poison. Down at the very bottom, we have steel, dragon, and fairy. This is interesting, cool, nice chart. But how does this compare to last season? That's what's really important. This next chart is a variability chart showing the exact delta between this season and last. We see every type and the percent of the format that it made up last season, which are the red points, and then the percentage of the format that it makes up this season, which are the blue points. We can see last season water type was number 1, which makes sense, the most common type in the game. But since then, it's gone down while grass has gone up, and it's been overtaken by grass. But the most interesting chart is this last one we're going to look at. So this is another variability chart, which shows the relative percent change for each type between seasons 12 and 13. The types in red have dropped more than 10% of their former relative population, the hardest hit being fire, which dropped more than 25% of its representation. As expected, this impacts the better types harder, because, right, all the good mons of those types are gone. So on the flip side, we see 3 types becoming a lot more common. Ice increasing by 40% of its former relative frequency is kind of crazy. And the other 2 that have seen a pretty big uptick are poison and rock, which, hey, look at that, those are traditionally 3 of the worst types in the game, which again makes sense because there's only a couple good ice types that left, and most of them are still sticking around, stinking up the lower tiers. So with the unique makeup of this format, naturally the best and worst types to have on your team are going to change a little bit. But honestly, the typing thing doesn't really change that much compared to last season. These tables here are the 12 best defensive, offensive, and overall types in the format, which I chose 12 because there are 120 different types in this low tier format. So overall, we can see Dragon Steel is the best on defense, Ground and Ice for offense, and hey, look at that, Skarmory all by itself is the lone Steel Flying type, is the king here. But the type frequency isn't the only thing that changes in this low-powered format. We got to consider the average stats we're going to be working with on our teams. So to do this, we're only going to look at what I called bringable mons, which I arbitrarily put as anything more than 2 points, and maybe some stinkers that one or two points that are maybe a little more valuable, I thought. So what we see here is about a 10-point base stat drop on both the physical and special side from last season, with an average attack stat being 84, which is Dragonair, and this average special attack stat of 74 around Hypno. On the defensive side of things, we're just going to be using effective defense and effective special defense, because I think those are better metrics. They're not skewed by confusing HP and defense calculations. But essentially what this means is these are about 10 points less than they were last season as well. If you're looking to take physical hits, Hawlucha has the average bulk of a Mon in this format, and if you're looking to take special hits, Toadschool is about the average specially bulky Mon. And lastly, for speed, we see a nice normal distribution, nice little bell curve, with the average Mon being about base 70 speed, so Litten and Sobble stocks are on the rise, perhaps. And when you take a look at all of these stats combined, you see about 50 base stat points lower BSTs than he did last season, so that's a pretty significant drop in power. But despite all this, there's still too much going on here. A board of this size, it keeps me up at night, it impairs my ability to function as a member of society, so there's too much going on here. I need to call for backup. So this season, I called on the one and only Mrs. Fresh to help me out with the draft. She's been playing Pokemon as long as I have, but just not the competitive side of things. So by our powers combined, we turn the Phoenix Suns into something greater than the sum of our two parts. This season, we're the Phoenix Eclipse. So to help me out, Mrs. Fresh took a look at the draft board we had established, and she made things a bit easier on me. I gave her the full list of Mons on the board, hid their point values from her, shuffled the order, and just asked her, hey, which of these do you like? I gave her a nice little Google Drive sheet thing, and she just went through and said yes or no. And if they're ugly, or if they have bad vibes, no matter how good or valuable that Mon might be, it's off the board for me. So sorry, Rhyperior, I was looking at you, but Mrs. Fresh thinks you're ugly. So after the culling, this is what my board looked like. And with a smaller board, things get a little more difficult, but also they get a little more streamlined. It's more difficult to obtain certain moves and types that I need. I mean, look at this type Pareto here. This is what the Pokemon that I had to choose from for this season. This is how the types break down. So I got a whole lot of Psychic types to choose from, but I have literally 2 bugs and 2 fighting. So hope I didn't need those. But with my picks being as limited as they were, it made the draft a little bit easier in that, hey, I obviously need to pick this Mon, or I need this specific typing because I can't get it anywhere else. So before we get into the draft, let's review. So this format is super physically biased. A 10-point difference between the attack and special attacking stats is even larger than it was last season. Obviously 10 is 10, but the difference between 84 and 74 is larger than the difference between 94 and 84. So we want to make sure we get our intimidates, right? Fairy type, and honestly, offensive fairy types in general are super, super rare because all the good ones are gone. 5 types, water, grass, flying, poison, and normal, they make up just a huge percent of the format, so I need to be able to cover those because most teams will probably have 2 or 3 Mons of those types. Another thing to consider is the general lower offensive power, lower moves, lower stats, less crazy abilities. You're going to have a higher chance to stick around for more turns during a game, so it's probably important to have a larger move pool here because you have the chance to click maybe more than just one move before you explode. So something to consider. And lastly, the speed tiers are more condensed. We have less crazy fast things, fewer crazy slow things, and typically when you're drafting a team, having your Mon speed tiered about 10 speed points apart is a pretty good thing, but in this case with these more condensed clumped tiers, 5 speed is actually a pretty big difference here. So having a 45, 50, 55 Mon maybe sounds a little bit better than it does in other seasons. So with all that out of the way, let's take a look at what I picked for my round 1. Starting off, I wanted something versatile with a great move pool. So I think I picked something that is probably one of the biggest value picks on the board. I picked up Lapras for 7 points. This Mon has it all. It has a good offensive typing, incredible stats, especially for the cost, honestly. It has a huge move pool because it's a Gen 1 Mon. Depending on the week, it could be my main damage dealer, it can be team support, or it can just be a late gamer with Oko moves or Perish Song or whatever it needs to do, and it has the bulk to do all those roles reliably. Lapras can make use of a whole bunch of different items and Terra types, and with a good speed tier, being able to outspeed base 115 Mons with just a single boost, and a lot of teams really don't go that much faster than 115. That's a pretty decent speed tier to be at. But the big thing about Lapras that I was really considering and why I wanted to pick it so badly is that it's the best freeze dry user in the format. You see things like Iron Bundle, Water Stab plus Stab on freeze dry, unresistible. You can't do anything about it. So with something as strong and bulky as Lapras, it's always going to have a big presence on the field and in the team builder. So Super happy to grab it, and I think it's a great round 1 pick. My second pick was all about dealing... Oh, shit. Oops. Oops, hi. I forgot to turn my face on for Lapras. But for round 2, let's take a look at what I got. I wanted something that deals big damage, which is honestly something that I liked a lot of last season. With my first pick of Lapras, I was kind of scared that I'm going to go down the same route of just, hey, pick all the bulky mons and you'll win, right? No, didn't happen last season. So what's kind of crazy is that Alolan Exeggutor, a low tier mon, with a single Draco Meteor deals more damage immediately than anything on my entire team could last season. I think the most powerful attack of my team was Camerup's Overheat, which is coming off of 20 less special attack. But hey, Draco Meteor, good type of move. Not many fairies or steals. 125 special attack, sounds good to me. So on top of its good, honestly, mixed offensive stats. I mean, look at that. 105 attack is the top 80th percentile. Can't discount that. It has a good move pool because it has, hey, the lovely combo of being a Gen 1 Mon, kind of, and evolving from a Psychic type. So it has the combo of the Gen 1 massive move pool and the incredible move pool of support moves that Psychic types get. So thanks, Execute. You the man. If I want a super solid Trick Room setter, I can run Frisk plus Fake Out with my partner, and I can be in a solid position from turn 1, threatening Trick Room, or just a straight up KO off the bat with how strong those Draco Meteors are. But if I want to play the longer game, I don't have to run Frisk. I can run his other ability, Harvest. So between Harvest, Leech Seed, and Sleep Powder, this thing's sticking around forever, especially considering that Grass Dragon's a pretty good typing. Any way I bring this thing, it's a massive force to be reckoned with, and I think it's really, really deserving of that round 1. Or not round 1. It's really deserving of an early pick, so it's on the team. So remember how I said earlier there's like no fairy type offense in this format? So unless I'm missing something or doing a calc wrong, I think Granbull is actually the strongest fairy type available. When most teams' choice of fairy type offense is probably just a Terra Fairy Terra Blast, Granbull stands far and above the rest of the format as the only good fairy type attacker, besides maybe Rabambi. Not to mention, Granbull was one of my only 2 choices for a good Intimidate user. It was either going to be Granbull or Overquill, and as much as I love and will draft Overquill eventually, Granbull just fits the team better, and hey, did I mention that fairies are super rare? The final decider for this is the move pool. Overquill deals more damage immediately and has better ability choices if I'm not running Intimidate, but overall, it doesn't have the same utility that I think Granbull does. Having access to Roar, T-Wave, Helping Hand, and all sorts of useful attacks that are mainly utility things like Snarl and Super Fang, this kind of makes Granbull like a little mini Incineroar, right? Slap an Assault Vest on it, pivot in with Intimidate, lower their attacks, do decent damage. I think it's a recipe for success. Is it a stretch to call it Incineroar? I don't know, maybe. We'll find out. And hey, since I picked a dog for round 3, it only makes sense that I pick a cat for round 4. Meowstic was looking good to me because there's 3 main reasons. 1, look at that move pool. Look at how many little things it fills in on that list down there. With all those moves, it can find itself a spot on a team composition pretty much any week, and gives my team lots of good value while doing so. On top of that, it has a good speed stat, it has Fake Out, love that, and Competitive is actually a super useful ability in this format with how physically biased a lot of teams are, and spoilers, my team is going to be physically heavy. Having ways to deter Intimidate and other things like that is super, super useful. So I think Meowstic is a good pick for the team. It's not super flashy, but it's a really good support mon, and it's going to make itself pretty well known, I think. Also, it was the fastest user of Fake Out I had, so it was kind of a no-brainer. For round 5, I needed the obligatory Tailwind setter. Every team's got to have one, right? So I went with none other than good old Braviary. This mon, I think, has always been a little bit overlooked. I drafted it back in Season 6 and didn't bring it to a single game. It showed up in Team Preview, but it never hit the field, so this is really my first time using Braviary. As another Intimidate deterrent with Defiant and its high power moves and super, super high attack stat for the format, and honestly, it has a good utility move pool too, even beyond just Tailwind. Braviary is a massive threat, whether it's just hitting you and killing you right off the rip or setting up the team to kill you next turn. So, super excited to use Braviary. I think it's going to put in a lot of work. And up next, this is a mon I've wanted to pick since Scarlet and Violet came out. I'm so happy that I managed to pick up Clodsire. It's my favorite Gen 9 mon. It's my wife's favorite Gen 9 mon, so super happy to add him to the team. But Clodsire adds a lot into a team with a pretty unassuming package. So traditionally, you think of Clodsire, it's kind of like a meme pick, right? It's cute. That there was that one team that used it to counter Urshifu. That there was the guy from our server who was the one who popularized that, which is pretty sick. So good on you for that. But beyond countering Urshifu, Clodsire is kind of just a meme, right? But in this format, It's much more than that. It's one of the few good ground types that I had available, and I think it's going to put in some serious work. It has crazy special bulk, so you basically never need to invest in that. I can invest fully into physical bulk, which pumps up these numbers pretty significantly. When you pair it with damage control, it becomes an unkillable tank, right? So you can stack it with curse boosts, which you can use itself, or you can pair it with intimidate or burn, something like that. So it's sticking around on the field for a super long time. Pair that with high-powered stab moves, good support options, recover, and look at that. The second lowest speed set of any fully evolved mon in the format. It is the second percentile for speed with base 20, so it can be a good Trick Room attacker, or it can be a Trick Room supporter, or it can be Trick Room deterrent, because it gets the super niche move after you, which typically you see on Lilligant, but what's faster than Lilligant in the sun, right? Cloudzyre and Trick Room. So we have the ultimate Trick Room attacker and deterrent here, all baked into one adorable little package, so Cloudzyre made the team, going to be one of our MVPs, I think. Up next, this pick, I'm so lucky that I got. I didn't think it was going to come to me. At this point in the draft, there was only one fully evolved fire type left that I had access to. And, spoilers, it was Flareon. The scary part was, after I picked Cloudzyre, I'm pretty sure Pancake picked it in the other conference, which kind of scared me because I was thinking, oh shit, people might remember that Flareon's on the board now, and I'm not going to end up with a fire type. So I had resigned to not getting a fire type, and I was trying to look at how I could fill those defensive holes without having a fire type, and I was also considering just picking Growlithe and slapping an Eviolite on it and calling it a day. But by some miracle, Flareon came back to me, and for round 7, I think this was an awesome pick. I'm so glad I picked it up. If you can support its pretty bad, admittedly physical defense and weird speed tier, you've got a mon with crazy damage potential. Base 130 attack, which is already 96th percentile, paired with Flare Blitz, is always going to hurt. And hey, if you add in Guts or Flash Fire Boost, you're dead. You're just evaporated. I mean, Flareon probably dissolves in the process too, but hey, that's a price I'm willing to pay. Trade a Flareon for something like Articuno maybe. Sounds good to me. I'm willing to pay that price any day. So Flareons on the team are kind of instant nuke button. Pick number 8 comes from Mrs. Fresh herself. I had no idea what to pick this, so I just showed her a list of 3 different mons, kind of like what LS was doing, and she picked Kingdra. So Kingdra was the pick I was most uncertain about at first because I already had a water and a dragon type, but the more I've been thinking about it, the more it's been growing on me. Kingdra is an absolute Swiss Army knife, and when I say Swiss Army knife, I don't mean like, oh, it'll be team support one week, oh, it'll be defensive and endgamer. It just is a Swiss Army knife in that it can kill you this way, it can kill you this way, or it can kill you this way. It is so unbelievably powerful, and the stats kind of betray that, right? The only thing it really stands out for is the overall base stat total because its stats are so flat across the board, but we have a physical attacker, we have a special attacker, we have a swift swim sweeper, a sniper crit machine. Just so happens that it has the most powerful attack in the format with a crit. It just so happens to have the strongest attack in the format, being a crit Draco with sniper active. So yeah, pair that with 2 mons that have Dragon Cheer in my team. Slap a scope lens on it, the crit item, one of the 2 crit items, either one. And you click Draco Meteor and your enemies just die. So that's pretty sick, right? I love that. I think Kingdra's going to be great at that, but honestly, even if you don't want to, you can still support the team with a super fast rain support mon. Use Breaking Swipe, use Clear Smog if you're facing a rogue Dondozo that someone hacked in. You never know what happens. But Kingdra's main job, let's not joke about it, it's just here to find the best way to kill the enemy team and then do it. Love that for Kingdra. For my 9th pick, this is my last value pick. I was saving my points pretty conservatively because I needed to pick very specific pieces, and this is the last thing that I'm saving up my money for. So this is a mon that I had never considered until Jace picked it in the other conference, but then I went back, I looked at it, and showed it, I was like, oh shit, this mon's kind of gas. So Tinkaton, sorry, not Tinkaton. God, if I could have picked Tinkaton, I would have, that would have been my round 1 for sure. But Tinkatuff, mini Tinkaton, the middle one, it's very unassuming, right? It's a little tiny girl, has a little tiny hammer, but this thing's amazing. These stats I have up here are without a Violite, but once you turn on a Violite and factor its, if you turn on a Violite, max out its bulk, and consider the fact that it's going to be taking resisted hits most of the time, this thing becomes the 3rd bulkiest mon in the format. No joke. It's crazy. It's even bulkier than Tinkaton when you consider the Violite. So you couple that with its huge variety of support moves and honestly pretty decent speed stats. 78's above average, and it's a little shitty NFE support mon, right? It's super difficult to remove. It's going to be knocking off your items, faking you out, hitting you with T-Wave, setting up screens, or, oops, faint, and now your mon's dead through Protect anyways, or, he double screens, and now I'm definitely living for 15 million turns. Yeah, Ticket Tough is incredible, and I'm so glad that Jace picked it because I was not thinking about it at all. The way things are going in the draft, I have a whole bunch of support options. Look at all these moves I have filled out. But I just want more attackers because if I learned anything from last season, you got to have some offense on your team, right? Having the threat of Dondozo doesn't mean anything if it doesn't get to set up and kill things, right? So I had that to worry about. I also needed some more ground resists. And hey, look at that. There's my bug and fighting type that I was talking about earlier. The one mon that can fill both of those for me. Heracross, and it's still sitting there undrafted in round 10. What? I had to pick it up. So remember how I was talking about how Flareon is super strong and Kingdra is super strong? Hey, Heracross is right up there too. 125 base attack, close combat, Mega Horn, and then oops, turn on Guts to get a 50% boost. Oops, turn on Swarm to get a 50% boost. Or oops, get one kill and get the Moxie boost for another 50% boost. It's crazy. Heracross is a massive threat. Obviously, there is the big problem of, there are 4 types that resist both of its stabs, which admittedly sucks a whole bunch. But when you hit everything else on the team super, super hard, maybe it's fine to have one mon that Heracross can't take down. I guess he'll settle for 3 KOs in a match instead of 4. He'll be okay, he'll be fine. And lastly, we have our much needed flying resist. I didn't pick Ampharos for any other reason than it's an electric type and I didn't have one yet. I was thinking about picking Bellybolt, but I figured Ampharos plus Heracross was better than Bellybolt plus some other cheap shitmon. So hey, Ampharos is on the squad as our last member, has electric attacks, has Dazzling Gleam, has Meteor Beam. That's all a mon needs to succeed, right? So, gonna deal good damage and make everybody smile. Nothing too fancy. So with that, we have our Season 13 team. Building the squad was super, super fun. I'm really glad that I did this draft challenge. It was actually way more exciting than I thought it would be. Having to be so worried about snipes, especially Flareon in round 7. That was spooky, which was actually really the only big snipe I had, I think. I wasn't too particularly sad about anything else that went. But yeah, super excited for this team. Looking to see how it turns out. I will see you all in week 1 very shortly. Love you. Bye-bye.